Hello and welcome to Too Many Movies, the podcast where we discuss DVDs, Blu-rays, and even the occasional VHS tape. I'm your host Hal, and with me here today, Izreal. Introduce yourself.
Hello everyone, my name's Izreal, and I have a letterbox, and that's where I just do like movie reviews, and yeah, that's it.
That's it. That's all we need. All right, well, bye everybody. We've done our episode today. No, I'm just kidding. Shortest episode yet. No. Welcome, Izreal. This has been a long time coming. I apologize. It's been a couple of months.
It's fine. I'm a patient guy. It's fine. I get it. I get it. Like, you have a bunch of like other episodes that you have to do, so like, I get it. It's no issue.
Yeah. Well, thanks, dude. Well, I mean, so let's get started then on our first movie today. The first movie you wanted to talk about, that being Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, a Terry Gilliam movie from the year 1998.
Yep.
I have it on Blu-ray. It's, again, Terry Gilliam, who I've brought up a couple of times on the podcast thus far. I did 12 Monkeys way back when. I did Brazil with Lazy Bones. He's kind of been around. I'm a big fan of Terry Gilliam, of the movies I've seen thus far from him, I would say.
Me too.
Yeah, so, Izreal, what did you think of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas?
Well, this is my third watch, and I still completely love it. Like, it's one of my absolute favorite movies, and I know that you might not love it as much as I do, but like, I love the shit out of this movie, man. I love it so much.
Yeah, no, I can definitely get that from your Letterboxd reviews, and I mean, I get it. This is not a movie that I've seen a lot. Again, this was like my second time watching it. And when it comes to like Gilliam movies, this is definitely one of the ones I've seen the least. This in Brazil, I would say, because I've seen 12 Monkeys a lot. I've obviously seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail a ton of times. No duh. But yeah, when it comes to Gilliam's other kinds of movies that aren't Monty Python, I'm a little varied in what I think. I mean, I like them, but I think I'm starting to get a better sense of how I feel about his movies.
Yeah.
I think this is definitely a Gilliam movie. It's weird. And yeah, it's just weird. I think that's the best word to describe, to like kind of encompass it all. It's weird.
Yeah, there's a lot about like Gilliam's style in general, and like it's so hard to like explain exactly like how he makes his movies, but like it's always like the most bizarre sense, and like the weirdest thing as well is like this is probably like his most like normal film, at least from the ones I've seen from him, because like this one's like the most when it comes to like actual reality, but like it's still like insane because like of the original source material.
You know what? That's a good point. This does take place in a realm of reality, but the reason it's so weird is because, well, the main character's like hopped up on drugs the whole time. So you're going to see a lot of weird shit. Yeah, no, that makes sense then. Yeah, so let's just start at the beginning, which unfortunately I can't. Every time I've watched the beginning, I can't help but think of the Nostalgia Critic review on "We're Back, a Dinosaur Story," because that's what he's parodying.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I've been Doug Walker brained. I've been Doug Walker.
It's okay. It's okay. When I was a young lad, I was very Doug Walker brain as well. Not as much nowadays, but like he's still a funny guy.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, I mean, I get why he parodied this movie in that review, because that movie was very weird, and like when it comes to Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, it's a very weird movie, so to say. I keep saying that, but I mean, let's start off with the beginning where Raoul Duke, so it's Johnny Depp is playing Hunter S. Thompson, essentially, right?
Yes, but in the original novel, he is also named Raoul Duke, because, like, in a way, like, Fear and Loathing is both... Fear and Loathing was based off of, like, an actual trip, like, Hunter S. Thompson took, but the thing is that, like, it's kind of like a fictionalized account of it, So, like, so basically, like, the base events are kind of true, where pretty much, like, he did go to, like, a race, and he did go to, like, that conference, but, like, they never were actually made, and, like, thus he decided to just make, like, his own story around it. It's kind of like a weird, like, non-sequitur from what I can get from his works. Of course, like, I'm still new to his works for the most part, but, like, it's very much a case where it's like, where it's pretty much like a fictionalized account. So So like, yeah, it's basically Hunter S. Thompson, but like it's Raoul Duke like as a character, you know?
Okay, yeah, I can see that. You know what? I thought he was just named Raoul Duke because it's like a just a fake name he uses because he doesn't, like, in case he gets arrested or like he gets caught with these drugs, he can be like, no, I'm not Hunter S. Thompson, I'm Raoul Duke. But
that's a very good point. That's a very good point. Because like,
I mean, that's what,
like
yeah,
because he did do drugs in real life, of course. So like that is actually a good point.
It was the 60s and 70s. Of course he was on drugs. Like, come on.
Yeah, that's the point of the movie in general.
Yeah, so the movie's about Johnny Depp as Raoul Duke and his attorney, Dr. Gonzo, played by Benicio del Toro.
Yeah, and he's a stand-in from Oscar Costa, I think. I forget like his full name, but his name's Oscar, who's like a stand-in for Dr. Gonzo.
Yeah. So basically, the whole movie is, you know, when you really think about it, like extraordinarily simple. It's just two guys go to Las Vegas, high off their ass, and hilarity ensues. You know, like it's a very simple movie when you get down to it because it's literally just these two high off their ass coming across like these different
scenarios.
These different scenarios, exactly. So again, beginning, they're on like the road to Las Vegas from Los Angeles. They're in this car, they're high off their ass. They have like a suitcase full of drugs, any kind of drugs. They have beers as well, just, you know, just cause, like, they have all these substances with them, and they're already high, and yeah, they're just totally twitchy and out of it. I love the fact that Raoul is just like seeing all these bats in his vision, and then he's just like, we can't stop here, this is bat country. Like,
that's one of my favorite lines. I was gonna say it first. We can stop here, it's bat country.
It's such a good line though, because it's so random, but actually it's really funny because he's like talking about the bats as he's leading up to it, and then like a couple minutes goes by, and then he's like, when they stop, he's like, we can't stop here, this is bat country. Like, it's great. Like, it's
that's what I love about this movie. Yeah, that's what I love about this movie. It's like, that's one of the main things I loved about this movie is that like the pacing of like the jokes is like perfect. It's genuinely perfect for me.
Yeah, like, I will say it gets a little weird.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say it gets a little weird, like the pacing, because it is, I mean, and I get it, like it is supposed to be like a drug trip, but you're not actually on drugs. It's supposed to like simulate a drug trip, but I do feel like the pacing, now that's not to say that every scene is like that, but it does, some of the scenes do kind of repeat and go on, and you're just like, okay, the joke is they're high off their ass, they're acting like jackasses in public, but that's it. Like, they don't really grab the attention of anybody else. Like, or maybe they just don't realize that they're grabbing the attention of other people. Like, I don't know. I feel like that kind of happens with every scene, you know? Like,
I kind of get that, fine. But like for me at least, like, even though that is kind of like the punchline, but at the same time, like, in my opinion, like, you know, the situations themselves are like so different that like I just don't really care, you know?
Yeah, no, that's entirely fair, because like, again, yeah, there's like so the first scene, they meet Tobey Maguire, who's a hitchhiker, who is like,
this is Spider-Man's origin story.
Yeah, Tobey Maguire with long blonde hair is fucking weird as fuck, but
yeah, it feels so like, weird.
Yeah, he just looks insane, but they pick him up, and then he realizes like Raoul and Dr. Gonzo are even more insane, so then he just leaves. And then you have like when they finally get to the hotel, and like Raoul's trying to check in, and like the woman's face is like being morphed, and like, you know, like the floor is melting, and then they're in that bar and you see all like these lizard people walking around. It's like,
please tell me about their fucking golf shoes.
Yeah, their fucking golf shoes. Yeah, it's so absurd. I will say it is weird. But again, like I'm fine with it being weird. You know, because like it's just, that's the thing with Gilliam, is like he does have kind of a weird sense with how he views his worlds. Like when you think of movies like Brazil and Time Bandits, like those movies already had like weird angles and weird close-ups of characters, so then like it gave you like this sense, you felt a little uncomfortable.
Exactly.
I would even argue like something like 12 Monkeys seems pretty restrained for his style. Like, I don't remember there being as many like wide angle lenses or like weird angles in that movie.
I remember there being some like cool like weird shit in 12 Monkeys, like that one shot and like
there was.
Yeah, of course, but like it's still the case where it's like, it definitely did feel a bit restrained. You might be right about that. One thing I'll say right now, personally speaking, you can go on. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, like, so 12 Monkeys felt a little restrained, but then they get back into like these weird camera angles and like the movements of the camera in this movie, and I feel like that kind of elevates it because they're on drugs, so like things are gonna be exaggerated because they're like high off their asses.
Yeah, so that's why, personally speaking, that like, in my opinion, at least Terry Gilliam was like the perfect guy in order to get for an adaptation of this. Like, he was
for sure.
Because like I cannot think of like any other director who could have done this movie properly.
Yeah, no, I agree. He definitely nails this weird and wonky style, and not even just him being the director. Like, Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro are fantastic as their characters. Like, I especially love Johnny Depp in the role. Like, he's so cartoony that it's laughable every time. Like, I just love everything he says. He's just so funny.
It's so, like, he not only just fits like the perfect Thompson, but also it just feels like so weird that this is like one of his earlier roles. Like, I know it's not like his first or anything like that, but like it's still like relatively like early in his career. So like so like what we associate with him now, like is so different to see like someone like Ral Duke.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like we've talked about Johnny Depp on the podcast before because he was in the movie Ed Wood, which we've talked about, and he was really good as Ed Wood, like this convincing portrayal of this real life person. A little exaggerated, a little cartoony because it's Ed Wood, and it's not like an entirely 100% accurate portrayal of the events of Ed Wood's life, but that kind of adds to it because it's supposed to be like a dramatic retelling of this guy's life. Same thing here. Like, again, it's a real life person. He kind of brings that real life person to life, but in a very cartoonish way. Like, it's very similar. I mean, it's not very similar because let me tell you, Ed Wood and Hunter S. Thompson, despite the fact that they're fucking weirdos, like, they're very different flavors of weirdo,
Yeah, like Ed Wood was mostly just like a film director, who just had like a very weird way of like making films. While with Hunter S. Thompson, like he hung out with like the Hell's Angels, for God's sake.
yeah, exactly. I just love, and I also, this is a small detail, but I love how he always like describes himself as a doctor of journalism. Every chance he gets, he's like, "Oh, I'm a doctor of journalism." It's like it's so pretentious, but in a way that I kind of love. Yeah, it's so
like
funny.
I think Val Duke is like very much like an exaggerated version of like Thompson himself. Like I feel like Fear and Loathing was just like his way in order to like get like a super like weird version of himself across.
Yeah, no, bottom line, Johnny Depp, very good in the role.
Yeah, he is so good. And Benicio del Toro also does amazing as Dr. Gonzo. From I can tell, like, he's very much
del Toro in this. Yeah.
From I can tell, like, he's very different from like how he was portrayed in real life. But to be fair, that's kind of the point, because the real Oscar was like an actual like attorney. So it was a case where where he had to like fudge things up a bit more, because like he dealt with a lot of different shit. Because after the book was made, like a while after, but like. Oscar went missing because what he was involved in at the time. So he was never found.
Yeah. Oh God, that's the real Jimmy Hoffa situation.
Yeah, it's
wow.
It's really depressing. I recommend watching a video on it sometime. It's really interesting. But either way,
absolutely,
he does amazing in this film.
One thing I really like is that you think because Raul is such a energetic and sporadic kind of person, especially on drugs, that you think like, oh, Dr. Gonzo is supposed to be like the straight man where like he's supposed to kind of like anchor in their antics, but he's not, because he's also high and on drugs.
Exactly.
So but what I like is that like every once in a while it kind of shifts. Like at one point, Raul is like the guy who's like high off his ass, really just out of it, really just so far gone. And Dr. Gonzo, who is also high, but is a little more level-headed. And then every once in a while, that kind of shifts, where Raul is the level-headed one, and Gonzo's like the one who's just like so far out of it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and like they have to like and it's kind of case where like at the end like they kind of like both combine into like a terrifying. Of course, we're not there yet, but like they kind of combine into like a terrifying like frenzy at the very end, So like
Yeah, exactly.
so it shows that like they need at least like one of them in order to like stay sober somewhat, so like things stay properly balanced for them, or else things are gonna go into like complete mayhem.
Yeah, but like you never know who the craziest person is out of the two of them, because it keeps shifting. Like sometimes Raul's the crazier person, sometimes Gonzo's the crazier person. Like it keeps shifting, and it keeps you on the edge of your seat, because you're like, oh, what are they gonna do in this scene? Like, because
Exactly.
for example, like let's talk about the DA convention. Yeah, they go to a hotel with a bunch of cops from all over the country while they have drugs in their suitcases, and they never get caught, which is funny. But like I just like seeing them interact in like, for example, like the DA scene where like they're like at some like a meeting or a conference, and like and you have like you have like the guy at the front like telling them about like, oh, the drugs are bad.
There's 4 stages
like
of being hip. I forgot the rest. Hip.
Yeah.
Cool. Oh, yeah, I forgot how it goes. Fuck.
I know. It's Michael Jeter. He's a very good actor. But like, yeah, no, he's going like hip, cool, groovy. Like he's like naming the different levels of like of the in crowd.
Yeah, it's so funny. And then there was Square, which is like the one that which like Square, most normal people are like.
Yeah, I love the way Michael Jeter says groovy. It was just so funny. But what I love about that scene is like how subtle it is. How like, they're at this conference talking about, really cracking down on drugs and like addictive substances. Meanwhile, every person in that room is smoking a cigarette. Like I was gonna point that out. Beautifully ironic.
I know. I was gonna point that out because like that's something I noticed on like in my second watch through. Because like the thing for me is that like this movie in general like is both like very funny, but also like is a really great commentary in terms of like the drug culture of the time, and like why in a way that like the revolution kind of failed. And like it's really interesting when it comes, because like it's both like, I think the reason why it's like so easy to like go through, because like it's both funny but also like it has like a core like theme to it in a sense.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you say the revolution failed, because there is that scene early on where Raul has like a bit of a drug trip back to when he was in San Francisco in '65, and he sees the real life Hunter S. Thompson at the Matrix bar, which was pretty funny. It was a very clever meta scene.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
But it's funny because like that's such an interesting idea, because the '60s were insane, like very insane. Like that's what the movie Fritz the Cat was about, like just how insane the '60s were, and like how just absolutely nutty and kind of a cultural shift it was for not just the United States but for culture in general, I would have to say. But at the same time, what was really accomplished in the '60s, because again, like Vietnam still happened, and like again, this takes place in the early '70s, and you can definitely feel there's like a feeling of like almost like, oh, what are we doing now? Like after the big party that was the '60s, now you're into like the very depressing '70s where you're just like, oh god, what did we do?
Yeah, exactly. Like that's,
and I feel like what Raul, you definitely get the sense, because Raul and Gonzo are like the only ones who are kind of like drugged out, and like because it definitely feels, because like every other person in Vegas is just like looking at them weirdly as they're like acting like complete jackasses in public. And so it just kind of reinforces this idea that like, oh, those guys are living in the past. Like I may be interpreting it wrong, but I kind of see it that way.
I kind of have like a slight interpretation with that as well, because like for me at least, like I feel like when it comes to like the way that drugs were like used during the '60s, and like how they're used now, is kind of like supposed to be like reflected through like Raul Duke and Gonzo, because like during like the '60s it was a bit more like casualized, I guess, with like weed and stuff, but like with Raul Duke and Gonzo, they're just like just splurging, they're just like being complete jackasses, just because like that's kind of like how a lot of people like use drugs now. So it's kind of like in my opinion, it's like it's like them slowly like misunderstanding like why most people like did drugs back then. That's at least that's how
they did it
that's
to like kind of like, you know, stick it against the man, you know, just be like, ooh,
Yeah.
I'm on drugs, I'm sticking it against the man. Whereas like nowadays, you know, if drugs are your entire personality, you're a piece of shit and I don't want to associate with you at all, you know? Like
exactly.
it's amazing how things shift over time.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I
it
just
does
like
lead
about
to,
this
it does lead to hilarious situations.
it does, like this yeah, like a classic scene where pretty much they're like, you know, in the hotel room, and then Gonzo's just in the bathtub, and he's trying to like kill himself.
Yeah, he's listening to the song from the Matrix Resurrections trailer that was used a million times. It was like, well, what the fuck is that song called? Like White Rabbit or something like that.
Yeah, White Rabbit.
Yeah, and like he's just like, but because he's so high off his ass, he's just like, play the song. I want you to drop it right when she hits that note, so then I fucking kill myself listening to that amazing note. It's just like,
yeah, the note where the rabbit tears his own head off.
Yeah, exactly. And Raul's just like, no, I'm not gonna do that. But then he's just like, all right, fine, I'll do it. But also I won't. Like he's also high off his ass, so he's like acting like really wonky and weird. And plus the fact, I this is a small thing, but I just love when Johnny Depp like uses the megaphone and he's just speaking to Gonzo through the megaphone. Like, I don't know why, I just think that's funny, just hearing his voice to the megaphone where he's just like, stop it, you piece of shit. Like, I don't know, it just gets me every time.
Yeah, every part gets me in this film.
Yeah,
but yeah, another thing is that also like he does technically dispatch the situation, but also not, because he ends up having a Z cut in his head afterwards.
Yeah, well, was that actually cut in, or was that supposed to look fake, like he drew it on as if to like mess with Raul?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure actually. I don't remember,
because he doesn't
like,
have a scar for like the rest of the movie.
Yeah,
so that's why I'm wondering, like,
exactly,
did he mess
exactly.
with him?
I think it might be just a marker, but like I read the book and I don't really remember like specifically that like what it said there. So like I don't know.
Yeah, no, but it's interesting nonetheless. I love that scene. I know that we don't have to talk about every scene, but I do want to talk about a specific scene that I actually found really cool, and that was the pie scene. When they're at the diner.
Oh, that I was gonna bring that up, because like that's like the scene that like my very first viewing that like I kind of like caught on to, because like it's so hard to explain why it's so effective, but also like it just like really got to me my first time watching it for some reason.
Well, it's the it's the little things that really connect with me about that scene. So one thing, I find the scene where he's just like, how much for the pie, is just really funny, because he's just like, he just wants an entire pie. Like, that's funny in and of itself. But what I love about that scene is how like Raul is like kind of analyzing how the waitress is taking it. So Gonzo is threatening this lady by saying like, if you don't give me that fucking pie, like I'm gonna blow your brains out, or something along those lines.
Yeah, well, he's gonna like cut her up. You know, well, it's more like along the lines. It's more along the line like the situation like originally like he just wanted to like fuck her, you know, and like
yeah.
And she took it very
like,
wrong,
because he wrote on a napkin like backdoor beauty, and she's like, what the fuck is this? Like,
yeah, and like afterwards, like, you know, the situation started getting really bad, and then afterwards, like, he had this, because like this was like pretty much like the capping off point of like the whole like drug bender section after like, you know, the whole like a Dream of Chrome like, you know, thing, you know.
Exactly.
So, like,
yeah.
So like I feel like it being the final scene is really effective for that as well, but also like in general like the whole like. It's so hard to explain, but like for me at least, like the reason why it's so effective is because of the fact that like she is in a sense powerless, you know. Even with Raul there, he's also just high as fuck, you know. So it's like,
yes,
it's a scene that has always stuck with me ever since my first viewing. I'll just say that right now, because like it's kind of the scene that it's kind of like that whole like, you know, final section is like what I associate with Fear and Loathing the most, because like it's almost like, you know, climactic moment of the film for me, you know.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. One thing that really stuck with me was Raul like kind of analyzing her in this situation, how like the waitress is like, because like the way he describes her, he's like, her eyes were full of fear, but her brain was still operating on some basic motor skills, because that's when, you know, Dr. Gonzo's like, how much for the pie? And she's like, 35 cents, even though she's like terrified. She like still has it in her to, you know, do her job by saying, oh, this product that I'm selling is worth this amount of money. Like, but that just got to me. I'm thinking like, whoa, that's a basic motor skill doing her job. Like, I don't know, like, I know it's just such a small moment, but it like really got me thinking about like, you know, fear, and Loathing and Las Vegas. But, like no, but like really, like it really got me thinking of like just analyzing a person in that sense, you know?
Yeah, for me at least, like that scene is just like it feels effective as well because that's kind of like the moment in which like it feels the most masked off when it comes to like the issues with the characters, you know? Because like the rest of the film, it's kind of like clouded under like a sense of like genuine funniness, you know. But that scene's like a lot more quiet. It's not nearly as like it's like less destructive than like some of the other shenanigans in the film. But like at the same time, like it feels like a lot more, you know.
Yeah, because you get funny scenes like with Tobey Maguire and with Gary Busey as the highway patrolman who's just like, give me a kiss, I'm lonely. Like
fun fact about that scene, actually, that line was actually not in the script. It was just entirely improvised.
That's even better. That's so fun. I mean, that's Gary Busey for you. Like, weird guy, weird movie, so I get it.
Yeah, you get it.
You definitely get the sense that, like, every scene with these guys, even though they're acting like complete jackasses, and if you came across them in real life, you'd be like, these guys are menaces to society, like, get rid of them. But, like, you're still finding it funny because, you know, even though they're acting all high off their ass and they're destroying hotel rooms, they're just being general nuisances, it's still funny and handled with a sense of lighthearted comedy, even when they're with what's her name, Christina Ricci's character Lucy. You know how like essentially there's some like kind of pedophilic undertones with her and Dr. Gonzo, but the movie still treats it as funny.
Yeah, it's still like very much like it's very much like lighthearted in a sense still, even with that.
Lighthearted, you know? Yes. Until we get to the diner scene. That's when you like the drug abuse is really starting to like that's when I feel like that's a scene where like you start to see that like maybe this isn't that funny. Like even when they do that stuff with the maid where like, you know, they're threatening the maid and like that's still kind of played off for laughs. Whereas here once they get to the diner, it's funny because again there's that line with like her eyes were full of fear but her brain was still operating on some basic motor level. Like that's funny, but there still is a sense that you're not supposed to find it like the whole thing funny. Like this is when the movie's saying like, you know, look at this scene, like this isn't funny anymore. Like they're actually threatening this woman and this woman is terrified beyond belief. Like she starts crying. Like that's insanity. And I really feel like that I'm glad they saved that kind of like portrayal for that scene. Like I feel like that's when it really works, and especially this late into the movie, that's when you're like, okay, like I can see this now. Like,
exactly. Like sort of it's like you still do like a sense of like, you know, how bad things are going throughout, like because like Val Duke needed under the movie trying to piece together like what happened that night, you know, and like
that's true too.
Because like you see like all this destruction around you, but like most of it's still like, you know, mostly funny. But like on my second and third rewatch, like even though I did find some of it funny, but also like I found it a bit more uncomfortable in like a good way, you know? Because like
very much.
Because like they're very much like at the very like wit's end of like any sort of like basic like, you know, what a person would do, because like they're so high and like they're just so high to the point where they have no idea what they're even doing or saying. Like the scene where like, you know, where like Dr. Gonzo's like puking on the car, you know, like you can tell he has no idea what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not to say that like, oh, the movie doesn't have like a sense of the negative side effects of drug abuse throughout the whole movie. It absolutely does.
Yeah, it does. It does. But like in my opinion, at least, it just hammers it down more at the end. You know, where it's like,
that's when like the pacing of the movie, I feel like, that's when you really want to show it. Then like that's when not so much more obvious. It's still very much subtle in that scene. But I feel like, like after like the whole movie, you really want to get it across that like, all right, these dudes have been high for like however long the movie's supposed to have taking place. Like what has it been, like a week, and they're like still high? Like,
and I'm pretty sure it's been like 4 or 5 days, if I'm not mistaken. It's like it's definitely like across like the weekend.
Yeah, you know what though? I think it's very clever that the movie never really says how long it's been. You know, because the characters don't know how long it's been because they're high. Like, I think that's that must be like intentional. Like, you have no idea what the passage of time has been.
Yeah, exactly. They never actually like specify like when any date has been like in the book either. So like, I think it's very much like an intentional choice.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's very much intentional. Yeah, I don't really have that much else to say. Do you have anything else of worth you want to mention before we get into this Blu-ray?
Okay, the only other thing I'll mention is that like in my opinion at least, I'm very glad like this adaptation exists because from what I can tell, like in general, Hunter S. Thompson has like had a very poor track record with adaptations, and like I watched Where the Buffalo Roam just to like compare the two, and like that movie's pretty bad, and like it just doesn't get like what makes Hunter S. Thompson special as a writer. So like, yeah, so yeah, but yeah, I really love this movie. It's very important for me throughout time. Like the more and more I think about it, the more I like it, and like it's very much cemented as like a very important movie for me at this point. And I'm good, and yeah, I love
it. I can see that. Yeah. Again, yeah, like you said, I don't love it as much. But that's just because like it's only been my second time around. Like when I was watching this, I was like, oh wow, there's a lot, and I can't retain all of it, unfortunately. That's why when I was like writing down all these notes, I was just like hoping I could like write these down as fast as possible while also trying to experience the movie. But I think that's a good thing because it's such a weird and wonky movie that I don't entirely understand even after my second viewing. You know, that just means that I need to watch it more often, you know?
Exactly.
Like, yeah. I guess I will say like there's a couple like filmmaking things I really like. Like I like the what is it? The scene when I love the effect of Raoul turning on the TV and with the static playing, and then it turns, and then it cuts to him like on the couch, and like you see the TV static all over the wall. Like I think that's a really cool effect.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. There was also a similar scene like that earlier in the film where like he's like, you know, watching like old like war. Oh wait, he's watching stuff out of Vietnam, I'm pretty sure, and like there's like bombs everywhere, and then the camera guy comes in, and like all of a sudden he's like a war soldier.
Yeah, that's an interesting scene too.
Yeah, that was actually,
there's a lot of like war footage in this movie.
Yeah, because like that was a very relevant point to like the time period, because like Vietnam was still going on, and like that was such a big deal.
Exactly. And then I also really like the idea how this movie ends of like Raoul just driving off, and like you see like the billboard that says "You are now leaving Fear and Loathing," as if like that's how they say the end. You are now leaving this movie.
Well, there was actually the ending is that's actually one thing I wanted to bring up, because like the ending is actually pretty different from the book, actually, at least somewhat different.
Oh, okay.
So pretty much like what the film cuts out is like, you know, right after like Dr. Gonzo gets to the airport, and like pretty much in the book, like Baldur then has to make it to his own plane trip, but like the thing is he has to then go through like all the cops in order to get his drug case through. So like
Interesting.
Yeah, I think both endings work really well. I think in my personal opinion that like if they did go through like with like original ending, it would have bogged down the pacing a bit more, in my opinion.
Yes.
And like I'm fine with how the movie ends. Both endings are like really effective for what they are.
I like the ending because it's like the main characters like driving off into the sunset. It's like a classic ending. But you know, this dude's a piece of shit. He's eventually, we know he's gonna like tear shit up, keep fucking up as he goes along. But I don't know, there's just something kind of hilarious about that. And again, just the effect of like it panning over to like a billboard that says "You are now leaving Fear and Loathing." Like that's a very clever way to end the movie.
That's I when I first saw it, I was like, oh, that's a nice transition. That's nice.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you've read the book, like you're familiar with the book, so you have like the context of this as an adaptation, whereas I'm just going into it blind as just a moviegoer.
I think both versions are. Yeah, I think both versions are amazing. Like I watched the film first and then I read the book, and like I think both versions are like amazing either way. You know, I'm not sure which one I prefer personally speaking, because like of course like the book is still like the original source, but at the same time like as an adaptation it just excels so well. You know, because like like the only thing that they don't change that much throughout the book. Like it's a very like 1-to-1 adaptation, I would say.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. good movie. I feel like I'll love it a lot more upon rewatch. This is definitely a movie I want to keep for the collection. I will say though, I have this on a very standard Blu-ray. It's one from like, the early days of Blu-ray. Earlier days of Blu-ray, I would say. Because it's one of those universal Blu-rays where all the menus are all the same. It says on the front, the perfect high def movie experience.
I know exactly what you're talking about. That's like that's like when Blu-ray was just coming out.
Yeah, which again is can be quite quaint. I do think that's very quaint of it. It is not a case with the holes etched out in them.
Thank God.
Plus. But convince me on the Criterion release. So this does have a Criterion release, correct?
Yes, and I do personally own it. And personally speaking, like I'm not sure how like the visual quality is or anything like that is on the your Blu-ray, but like it has some pretty cool special features. I'll say that right now. It has 3 audio commentaries. One from director Terry Gilliam. One from with Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro, and the last one's with Hunter S. Thompson, like going over like the film. Let me think about what's else on there. There's a mini documentary like about like Hunter S. Thompson like going to like the set and some of his thoughts on like some of the production so far, and like there's also like a bunch of like stuff about the book itself on there. Like there's some like ratings of like certain chapters from like certain materials. There's definitely like a lot of cool stuff on there. But like of course of course that's mostly special feature stuff, but the Blu-ray itself like looks really great, of course. But personally speaking, like there's also, if you ever want this movie on like 4K, there's an Arrow release. So like if you ever want it on like 4K, you can get like an Arrow release. Of course, like it's in the UK only, but like it's region 4K for region free. So like yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I do have a 4K player, so it wouldn't matter. But honestly, I think I would love the Criterion just for like the commentaries alone. I don't mind this Blu-ray, but honestly, like there's so much more I want to know about this movie that I feel like I'd rather have those special features readily available. So honestly, you've convinced me.
I've listened to some of the audio commentary with Hunter S. Thompson, like the first 10 minutes, and like it was really funny. I'll just say that.
Okay, that's awesome. So yeah, I think even though I'm getting rid of this Blu-ray, because I think I'm gonna get rid of it. I'll upgrade to the Criterion someday. But regardless, like it belongs in the collection. Because this is a very interesting movie that I need to experience over and over again.
Yeah. No way I'm getting rid of my Criterion.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds like you're gonna keep that. That's good. Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah, even if I ever get a 4K player, like right now I don't have a 4K player, so I just buy Blu-rays. But like if I ever do get one, I'm still keeping the Criterion just because like it's such a good release, and plus like none of the special features are on like the Arrow release, so like I would still want to have those.
Yeah, I get that. That's totally fine. Yeah. All right then. We talked about Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Hey, we did it.
We did it.
Yeah, well, there's a second movie you wanted to talk about that I also own. That being The Silence of the Lambs, the 1991 Jonathan Demme movie that everybody knows about. Izreal, you wanted to talk about this. What are your thoughts on Silence of the Lambs before we get into some discussions of this movie?
Well, I thought it was very fantastical, and this rewatch, like, because I had not seen this movie since like 2020, so like it has been a while, and like my like thought process on like media in general had changed so much, but like this rewatch like has fully cemented in terms of, like why I love this movie in the first place, and like I love it a lot.
Yeah, I had not seen it since 2019. This was like an early log for me on Letterboxd. Like this was one of the earliest movies I remember first logging on the Letterboxd as like an actual watch. Like I had never seen it before logging it on the Letterboxd. My early days on Letterboxd are a little weird because I was like, do I log things I've already seen but I haven't seen in a while? Like, I was still trying to figure that out. But I do remember first watching Silence of the Lambs, and I remember being like, wow, this is really good. And then it's been a long while since I had seen it, so I'm glad this was due for a rewatch, and I'm glad you wanted to rewatch it. And yeah, honestly, it holds up exceptionally well.
It
I
does.
kind of like it. I kind of like it a lot more rewatching it, or at the very least, I know I'm super aware of what it is I love about it, to the point that
me too.
it's amazing.
This rewatch is like eye-opening in a sense, because like there was a lot of scenes in which I remembered that like were even better than I remembered, but also like a lot of scenes in which I kind of forgot throughout time, and like I'm glad that I kind of like re-remembered them because of this rewatch. Like this was like an amazing experience for me, like actually like experiencing it again.
Yeah, one thing that I love about it is that, yes, it's scary, I would say. It's very creepy, very unsettling kind of movie, but it also like is just a very well made and well told story,
Exactly.
Like, it's doing things that like normal movies don't often do very well. Like, it's effective at being creepy, which is a very difficult thing to do, but then it's also effective at telling the story. Like, it's effective at both things. And I feel like some movies decide to be one or the other, or some movies decide to be neither, which
is a lot of movies, sadly.
It's a lot of movies, exactly. So, just debating if I want to mention the VHS tape before we get into it, but maybe I should say that for later. I don't know.
Save it for later. We'll talk about it when we get to it.
Yeah, let's just talk about the actual movie. So one thing I want to mention, the music, like, wow,
the music,
very good. Especially the beginning. It reminded me a lot of like Hitchcock. Like, it had a very foreboding kind of like very Hitchcockian kind of like thriller music, where it was like very foreboding. Like, it's like kind of saying like, it's kind of leaving you a little uneasy, even though nothing's really happened yet, but it's supposed to like get you into the mood that the movie's gonna set.
Yeah, exactly. Because like really nothing's really happening, because like she's just training. That's all it is. And
exactly, she's running through the woods. Yes.
Yeah, to be fair, at first, like, you're not even fully sure, like, if she's being chased or anything, but, like, then after a while, you're like, oh, she's just training, that's it.
She's just training, yeah. And then we get the great subtle elevator shot when she walks in, and she walks into the elevator, and she's like so super small, super meek, and she's surrounded by all these big dudes. You're just like,
yeah, which is like a very good summation of like one of the themes of this film. One of the many themes, in fact.
Well, let's talk about that, because this is something that I remember watching, and then really appreciating. So, one thing this movie deals with is, let's just say it, sexism.
Sexism.
One of the very major, like, obviously one of the many things this movie tackles. It's not just a movie about like, sexism in the workplace.
Yeah, there's so many elements to this film.
So that's something that I really loved about this movie the first time I watched it, because, as I said, I watched it in early 2019, and I watched another early 2019 movie that kind of dealt with sexism. Remember Captain Marvel?
Well, I haven't. Well, I thankfully have not seen it, but like,
oh, good,
because I don't watch most like mainstream Marvel shit. I only good for Guardians.
So, but what I'm trying to get at is, I feel like for years, movies like Captain Marvel, like your Star Wars, because like that was kind of a subtle, in quotation marks, theme in like a lot of blockbusters in the 2010s, was like, kind of correcting the wrongs of the past, where you have a lot more female characters in roles, in like a lot of bigger female character roles in larger movies. But the issue with that is that the movies still suck. So like, when they're trying to get these themes across, it feels forced. It feels like the movie's talking down to you. Like, you can't really perceive the movie any other way. And Captain Marvel is like one of those things. It's not, I don't know if it's really the biggest offender of this, but it's just something that I kind of associated with, because it was like, oh, this is the first Marvel movie to have a woman as the main character, and you're just like, cool, I guess.
Yeah.
Who really gives a shit? Like, I don't, but
I don't.
Whatever. But it's important nonetheless. It's just that Hollywood's not very good at, portraying these important things. what I'm trying to get at is that, like, when I'm watching Silence of the Lambs the first time, I'm like, oh, this is a mystery thriller movie. But it's
that's kind of how I was.
Yeah, but it's a really effective movie at showing this character as like this meek little sheep in a industry slash workplace slash just in general. She's surrounded by wolves, like, you know, because she's a woman as an FBI agent. But what I love about that is that the movie never like talks down to you about these issues. Like,
exactly, it's so subtle. It's like it's very very subtle when it comes to, like, you know, how it tackles it, because like there's never like a sly line about someone being like, oh, you're just a woman, you know, because like it's always very subtle, and like there's so many like small moments that like really stick out to me and this rewatch.
Like there's like, first off, with the very first scene when she's talking to Jack Crawford, her boss, like the shots are like, you know, the camera angles, you're looking directly at the characters, so you're getting their perspectives, and like it's uncomfortable because you're literally looking into these people's eyes. Like, it's very very uncomfortable. I mean, maybe it's uncomfortable for me because I'm socially awkward and I don't like looking at people's eyes. But
don't. I get it. I'm exactly the same way. I'm exactly
exactly. But you get it. Like, it's such a brilliant way to shoot the movie, because it like really gets you feeling uncomfortable, because, well, that's what the movie is about. It's this mystery thriller about finding this serial killer who kills and like does things uncomfortably to women. Like, it's a very uncomfortable movie. So like, even in scenes that are not necessarily uncomfortable, like, again, we're just introduced to these characters in this one scene and you're already feeling uncomfortable. Like, that's a brilliant way to like establish the tone. And I love that. And then you have the next scene with Dr. What's his name? Dr. Chilton? Dr. This is embarrassing. I know the character's name is, in fact, Dr. Chilton. I was right the first time. But anyway, like, you know, again, Dr. Chilton, he's filmed in a way where he's looking towards the camera, so you feel like you're getting it from Clarice's perspective. And Dr. Chilton is unabashedly hitting on her. You know, he's like treated, but it's still done so in a way that's still subtle, even though you know exactly what he's doing.
Exactly. Like, it's more like under the breath, you know? It's like, it's not like she doesn't like fully notice it. It's just like, maybe she does notice it, but like, it's kind of a case where it's like, you know, it's a lot more like, you know, out of the way of like, you know, what the general conversation is, you know? It's like, it's just like a small part of like a bigger conversation, you know? It's not like entire scene where he's all like, oh, you're just a woman, you know? Like, that's the type of thing I hate in like films, you know, where like they just do shit like that.
Yeah, exactly. You just have guy characters who are just like, oh, I can't believe a woman did that. It's just like, why? Like, she's obviously like training to be this kind of like character. Like, she's obviously training. I think what I'm thinking of specifically. You remember that scene? Did you ever see Rogue One?
It's been a while since I've seen it, but I have seen it.
Okay. Well, there's this scene where like Jin, the main character, and Cassian Andor, I think that's the character's name, I don't remember, but Diego Luna's character, where they're like surrounded by stormtroopers, and so then they start fighting, and Jin, like, you know, starts shooting at the stormtroopers, and she shoots them. She does a good job, and Cassian Andor's face after she shoots them is just like, whoa. And I'm just like thinking, like, why are you surprised? Weren't you the one who hired her to, you know, fight the bad guys? Like,
exactly. Why are you surprised?
Whoa? Yeah, exactly. Whereas like here, it makes sense. Like, you know, I get it. Dr. Chilton is just kind of a piece of shit. But again, even though you know he's a piece of shit, he still allows Jodie Foster to meet with Hannibal Lecter. He still tells her everything that he would tell any other person going into the cells. Like, he's just like, oh, business as usual. Even though he has a bit of a sexist bias, because again, like, he was hitting on her just a second ago, but then he just drops it because he's like, whatever, like, you're not going for it, I'm not going to pursue. But it's like it's not a big deal to him, but it's a big deal to her because she's left uncomfortable. Like,
Yeah,
again,
exactly.
that's brilliant and subtle. I love that.
Like that, like the movie is like in general, like that's what I like about it, is the fact that like it does have like, it, technically speaking, like you can just get them, but at the same time like they're still like under the water in a sense, where you have to
Yeah.
like actually like think about it.
Exactly. And then you get the scene, like, as again, they're like going through all these different hallways, like going deeper and deeper into the basements of this mental asylum, like all these bars set up to like protect everybody. And then he's just like, and then he's like explaining Hannibal Lecter to Jodie Foster. And the fact that he has like a picture of like a nurse, the last nurse that dealt with him, and he like shows her a picture, and like the mood like changes. So like the way it's shot is like he shows her the picture. You never see the picture of the nurse in the picture,
Yeah, that's
and
something that I
then
really like.
the
That's
red,
something
like this like red light, like this like red hue like takes over like the movie. So then like you see, so like it's like shot in like this red kind of shot, like this red coloring, just to show, because you have Dr. Chilton, even though you're not seeing the picture, Dr. Chilton is explaining the picture where he's like, oh, you know, her jaw was out of place. They saved one of her eyes, and like the red lighting of the scene really like seeps in, like, oh, this uncomfortable feeling even more so, and you're just like, you're still, even though you never saw the picture, you still feel the horror of the picture because of the way the movie's edited.
exactly. I feel like that, like our
Yeah,
imaginations are more powerful than like anything the movie could show us.
exactly. And then there's the shots of all the insane inmates, each one more deranged than the last, like physically, because they're just like, rah, rah, rah. And then you get to Miggs at the end, who's just like, I can smell your cunt. And you're just like, ugh, what a weirdo. And
Yeah,
then you get to Hannibal Lecter, who's just standing there menacingly. But the movie's been building him up as like the biggest psychopath, even though he's just standing there, and like the psychopaths that came before him are just like insane. So that just gets you thinking like, oh, what is this dude's deal then? Like, if he's
yeah,
not like physically crazy like Miggs is, then what did he do to that nurse? Like, you're left like confused but intrigued nonetheless.
exactly. Like it's very like subtle, like kind of fear, because like he's just
Yes,
standing there. Like most people just like most people just stand. Like it's not something unnatural, but like the way that like the way that they just build it up, and then you just like see it, and
exactly.
you're like, oh, he's just standing there. But also like a sense of like, why is he standing? Like, is he gonna do something? What is he gonna do?
Yeah, and then I guess this is a perfect opportunity to talk about Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter, which performance of the movie, let's be real. Like,
Yes, performance
obviously
of the fucking movie.
Jodie Foster's Clarice is obviously the main character, but Anthony Hopkins like steals the show as Hannibal Lecter.
Exactly. Like, oh my god, he portrays like Hannibal Lecter so perfectly in every single way. Like,
He's so charismatic, even though he's insane. Like, that's the
yeah,
brilliance of it. You're falling for him, but that's just because he knows how to apply himself to Clarice's weaknesses. Like, it's so fascinating to watch. Like,
yeah,
you just love watching him work.
yeah. Anthony Hopkins and Anthony Hopkins like really knew how to play with with the other actor, since like because like there was like so many like moments throughout the film that like there were some moments throughout the film that I did use to improvise, because like one moment in which I remember specifically during like an interview is that like pretty much like he pretty much like because like you remember like the line where he was talking about like her accent, like that was like completely improvised, and like the anger that you felt like from Clarice, like that was like actual anger, because like it was an actual like sore spot that like she was really uncomfortable with. Of course she was happy that
Yeah,
like it happened, but like like that's what I love about from the performance, is that like it feels genuinely so real.
yeah, and
And
I
like
think that
it
also
just adds
adds
to
to
it
like
all.
I think that adds to the subtleness of the sexism, because in any other movie Hannibal would just be like, "Oh, you're a woman, but not everybody else is. Haha, lol. Like, aren't we smart, audience?" It's like, no, he goes right for the accent, and that's her weakness, cuz she's like, yeah, she's from like what, West Virginia. Like, she's like, she doesn't want to be portrayed as like this bumbling backwater folk. Like, she wants to be taken seriously. So then he's just like, "Oh, you're hiding your accent, I noticed." It's just like, oh, brilliant. Like that's what a smart writer would go after. Like the subtle differences, like the subtlety. I keep saying subtlety. I'm not very subtle with the subtlety, but like that, I love that. Like I love when movies don't treat me like a moron and they like have these characters make such smart decisions. Like it makes the movie going experience so much more fun because you as an audience member are figuring it out for yourself.
Exactly. I hate being watered down by a film, you know, or like any piece of art, because it's just kind of case where it's like, I want to actually like figure it out. I want to like puzzle solve it myself. But like like a lot of movies don't do that. They just spoon feed you in order to see how you being like, oh, it made you feel this way, huh? And it's like, no, I want to see how I feel. Damn it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very smart movie. Now, speaking of this very smart movie, then there's a scene where Migs throws cum in her face. Like, it's like the fact that this smart movie has that, but like, it's traumatizing nonetheless. Like, ugh.
Yeah, I remember like, I think I remember like really being like, oh, what the fuck when I first watched this movie.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it catches you off guard, but at the same time, you're just like, I mean, it's Migs. Like the dude looks like he would do that.
he would fucking do that.
Yeah. I want to talk about the self-storage scene. So I love the idea that like she figures out, like, I love how she's early on figures out that like Hannibal is just like using subtle clues for her to like kind of track down this killer. Because it kind of shows that not only is she figuring it out, like to show that she is capable of figuring this out, but like it also just shows that, Hannibal's kind of a dick and he just loves messing with people. Like It's a little Hollywoody, but at the same time, it makes for an interesting mystery. So I can forgive that.
I can forgive it too.
But I love that scene because they're trying to go into like the self-storage station. And I love, again, with the subtlety of the sexism, how the owner's just like, oh, we can't get it open. We'll come back tomorrow with my son. He's big and strong. But then Clarice uses her quick wits to solve the problem and goes to her car, gets the car jack, and brings the door up herself. Showing that she's capable. She's quick on her feet. So like, it's an interesting scene to show that again, she's like very much interested in solving this case and bringing this stuff she has like it's hard to explain, but like what I'm getting at. Like
I do. She actually has a thought process. Exactly. But yeah, and then you get inside of there and and there's a head.
There's a head in a jar. Also, with that scene, again, showing how smart this movie is, when the head in the jar is revealed, there's no musical score sting to say that, to spook you. There's no jump scare music. It's just it just builds up a little, but there's no sting to be like, duh, gotcha, didn't we? It's like, no.
Yeah, it just lets it be a moment, It's just allows it to be it's not quiet, but it's it's kind of case where it's quiet still, It's where you just have to sit there in awe in terms of what you're looking at.
Exactly. No, it's a brilliant scene. It's among a sea of brilliant scenes, but it really caught my attention that it's one of those times where the movie just does something so smart. Because, well, mainly I say it does it so smartly is because any other movie wouldn't have done that, So the fact that I have to point that out is kind of depressing because it's I wish more movies wouldn't fall for these easy traps, but whatever.
Whatever. I guess movies just have to suck.
I know. Well, I do love to shout out the editing and pacing. It's immaculate because I love how Hannibal warns of Buffalo Bill finding his next victim, and then the scene after we get Buffalo Bill getting his next victim, which, by the way, loading the couch trick, that's very scary. I'm never helping people move furniture ever.
Yeah, I forgot about how scary that scene was because it seems so reasonable, but at the same time it's still it's actually terrifying because it's such a way where it's she has to go all the way in the back and one scene that's like similar to it's like kind of like I don't know if you've ever seen it, but like The Visit with like the fucking cleaning oven scene. But like in that movie, like it's so like unsubtle and like feels like why would you need to do this, But like there's like she's just like walking home and like she sees him and like wants to help, and like getting all the way to the back seems reasonable enough, and like but then like once she realizes like once she like basically is like what's your size, and like all of a sudden like everything just falls into place and it's terrifying. It's genuinely terrifying. Yeah.
It's too late by that point because she's already in the car behind a giant couch. She can't escape. Like it's mwah, chef's kiss. And then the scene after that is the funeral home scene. So I've mentioned this funeral home scene. So like I think it was it was like last year when when I used to do review videos when I talked about Men, and I talked about that movie in comparison to movies like I'm Thinking of Ending Things and this movie. And there was a specific scene that I had remembered, but then I couldn't find it on YouTube, so I thought I had made it up, but I didn't. So in the funeral home, like because they're at a funeral home because it's like a funeral home / morgue, I believe, right? Because that's or is the morgue different from the funeral home? But regardless, Clarice and Jack Crawford go to this funeral home for this because they're trying to look at the body of this girl they found. And there's all these different cops just there, and they're all big dudes. And there's there's this one scene where Jack Crawford, like, and the sheriff, like, go into a different room, and then, like, the camera pans, and you see all the cops, like, looking at the camera, to say that, like, you're getting the perspective of Clarice. That's a really good scene of just, like, again, subtle sexism, because they're just looking at her, but you don't know what they're thinking, like, but you can only assume. And then
you can only assume.
And then the scene that I wanted to reference that I didn't get to reference in that video is the scene where Clarice, they're in the morgue because they're about to like open up the body and like kind of get her description and like kind of see like what clues they can find. And there's all the cops are standing there just like like the room is like so crowded, and she says, "Oh, gentlemen, can you please leave the room?" And again, me with experiencing surface level Hollywood sexism the first time I watched this movie, I'm like, oh, here we go, the sexist remarks. The cops are going to be like, "Hey, you don't tell us what to do, little missy." And then Jack Crawford will come in and be like, "No, everybody out." And then they'll listen to him. But no, they just file away, not saying anything. It's silence. It's like, holy shit. Like, that's amazing.
And like they just like look back as well, just being like, man, why were we like? It's just like you can once again you can only imagine what they're thinking, because like but like with the way because if they were because like in my opinion at least like if they actually did respect her, like they would be like, oh, okay, we'll leave. But like the way that they just like the way the scenes just like execute, it's just like you can tell that like they probably didn't want to, and like but like they just did just to like get to save their own skins in a sense.
Yeah, you don't know why they don't respect her, but like they still file out anyway, probably because of protocol, but it doesn't matter. Like, again, you definitely get the feeling that they don't respect her, but they still file away. You still get across like this feeling of sexism without actually blatantly saying it and making these characters cartoonishly evil. Like, I just love how the movie restrains itself and shows this far more effectively than any billion-dollar Hollywood movie nowadays would. Like it's just nice to watch a movie and feel smart for watching it, like
it feels like like I love when I actually get to like you can pick through a film and like see why I like it so much, instead of just like it's just blatantly telling me every single detail.
Exactly. Well, I guess the last thing I want to mention with this scene is that you never really get a full shot of the body. You get like different angles of like the decomposing hand. You get like kind of her face. You can definitely tell that she's covered in like leaves and shit because she was found at a river. She's all like bloated because she was like missing for like a week or a month, or I don't remember the exact details, but she's like decomposing and it's gross. But you never get a full like shot of the body. Like And I appreciate that. Like, again, our imagination can fill in the rest. Like, it kind of reminded me of the autopsy scene in Jaws. Obviously this showed a lot more because it's R-rated and Jaws was PG, so you really couldn't get away with it in Jaws. But like, like it, you are still filling in the blanks with your imagination, and I love that the movie is treating me like a smart person for seeing that, because I am smart. I am a smart person, please.
I am smart. I am smart.
Yeah, I'm a smart. Well, I guess so. They find the bug, and then she goes to the bug analysis guys, which again are creeps who hit on her, but again they're still doing their job. So, the subtle jabs, they're still subtle, because again, this movie doesn't waste time on that kind of stuff. Like, again, these are background surface, like these are things that are occasionally brought up, but it's not what the movie's about. Like, if Clarice like called out a dude and like went into this big speech about sexism, like the movie would come to a halt and the pacing would just be obliterated. But no, like the movie knows what it's about. It's about finding Buffalo Bill. So I think this is perfect that let's start talking about Buffalo Bill a little more. Like, Ted Levine is the actor who portrays him, and he's fantastic. I love this character.
Yeah,
because I love how like the bug analysis transitions to us noticing that Buffalo Bill has stuffed his entire basement with all these like interesting bugs and different creatures, like, and is that the scene where like he says like it puts the lotion in the basket? Is that the scene? Or I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, it's one of those scenes.
It's more along the lines of like just. Yeah, I think it was the first scene. The first scene was when it was like she was like stuck in a well, and like it was like
where he's just like it puts the lotion in the basket.
Yeah.
Which I love that, because like he genuinely doesn't see this as a girl he kidnapped.
Yeah.
He's like it. He's like referring to her as it, because he's like he doesn't want to associate with this girl, because then it'll be easier for him to kill her. So he's just like, it puts the lotion in the basket. And then like she just keeps on like saying like, please, mister, my mother's very powerful. Like, she keeps begging, and you do see it start to get to him, because even though he's like this emotionless weirdo who's a serial killer, he also does kind of have a bit of empathy, because
he's trying to like he's trying to like distance himself from like the idea of like they're even a person.
Yeah, but it's never like it's never. I feel like it never goes too far either way. Like, it never portrays him as like this emotionless, like evil dude who you're not supposed to feel any sympathy for. But it never goes full on sympathetic villain. Like, I feel like if you went either way, it would be way less interesting. But I feel like they balance the line very, very closely, to the point that I think he's a really effective serial killer villain, because again, he keeps saying it puts the lotion in the basket, and then she keeps crying, and then he just, at the end of it, he's just like, put the fucking lotion in the basket. Like, he's just it's like he's getting more and more like frustrated with her.
Starting to get really impatient about it, and starting to get really uncomfortable about it. And he's just in general like trying to like get his state of mind off of it.
Yes.
Yeah, at that point, it's the point where it's like, to his absolute limit, because of the fact that like he has to like constantly try to push aside like that is a person, but like he's starting to get more impatient with it as it goes along. So it starts getting more and more and more for him, that to the point where he just can't take it and needs to like get out of there fast. If you get what I mean. Like one of the themes of the film as well, where it's about the nature of evil, because like but because like it shows a constant contrast between Buffalo Bill and Hannibal Lecter. I feel like where they both like clearly give a shit about something, but like it's very like different when it comes to like the way that they do it. It's
right. Which one? Yeah, you know what? That's a good point, because you definitely get the sense that both of them, on some level, give a shit about different people, but at the same time, they're still serial killers. So like, they really don't, like it's one of those things, like, again, it's one of those things that I feel like the movie really dives into and portrays in different ways. Which I think we can get into when Lecter is let out of his he's finally, because like, it's revealed that Catherine Martin, the girl, the woman who Buffalo Bill has kidnapped, is the daughter of a senator. So
Yeah.
this is really serious. Like we really have to ramp up this investigation. The FBI decides, because I mean, fuck all those previous girls. Like the senator's girl is the most important. But again, the movie's very subtle about it. But yeah, so Dr. Lecter is let out of his he's let out of his cage, so to say, by order of FBI Director Roger Corman. That was Roger Corman as the FBI Director. As we all know, is James Shafrillis's favorite director. That's not slander. That's 110% true. Anyway, so Dr. Lecter meets with the senator, and in usual Dr. Lecter fashion, he's being very hammy, but in a way that's like very creepy. But he's also giving genuine information, except for when he says like his name is Louis Friend, and Clarice is like, I don't believe that, and then she starts deciphering it as like, oh, it's fool's gold. Like that just shows you that like Clarice is so used to him at this point that she like knows he's straight up lying. He would never just admit everything up front. Like, and then we get into him being kept in like that museum. So it's a little weird. So he's in a museum in Memphis, but then they keep cutting back to like establishing shots of DC. I don't know. That was a little weird, but I don't. Maybe I wasn't fully paying attention, but I just found that kind of weird. But he's in Memphis. He's in that weird. He's in that weird museum in Memphis, and I love their final interaction between Lecter and Clarice. Just like because I mean, one thing we should mention is that throughout the movie, like Clarice is kind of admitting some stuff to Lecter.
Exactly.
Which Jack Crawford said, like, don't do that. That's a very bad idea. But Clarice is young, naive, and she really wants to solve this case, and she feels admitting these things to him is the only way that will get him to, help them on this case. And so you start to discover why this movie's called The Silence of the Lambs, because, well, Clarice, as a child, ran away from her foster home because she realized they were slaughtering lambs on that farm, and she wanted to save one, but she couldn't. And so she feels incredible guilt for that. And so that's why you discover, oh, why is she so obsessed with wanting to catch Buffalo Bill and save these girls? It's because she wants to save somebody, because the last time she did, she didn't. Like, that, she wants to make a difference. Like, oh, it's brilliant. Like, it's so brilliant. And again, it's not delivered in flashback, it's delivered in Jodie Foster's performance and Hannibal Lecter working off of her, like, which is a case of the characters telling us this exposition, but it's done so in a way that is so effective that you don't need everything told visually, The
reason why it works so well is the fact that, like, these two characters, of course, like, it would be cool if, like, we did get to see it. Like, most movies would probably go for that route, but, like, if it was just exposition, it would be lame. But, like, it's the fact that, like, these two characters are, like, bounce off of each other so well. It creates a really great dynamic with the scene that otherwise would not be there. Yes. That's what I like about the scene. Like, yeah, it's exposition, but, like, it's exposition with, like, depth to it. That's what I like about it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just really cool.
Yes, exactly. And then she gets the case file. She never really sees him again for the rest of the movie. And then it's Lecter's time to take over the movie, because then he escapes, and oh, brother, it's amazing.
It really is. It's an insane sequence. The entire jailbreaking.
It's so good. So not only does he like take care of the cops, but then like you think he's actually escaped, but then no, the twists keep coming. He was the cop the whole time. Like it's cheesy, but it's exciting, Like, I love that the movie went for it.
It's a bit cheesy, you could argue, but, like, at the same time, like, it's so like tense because of the fact that, like, you have no idea where it's going.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many, like, different angles to it. It's like, and when you realize that the fact that, like, he did in fact, like,
exactly,
fake, like, where he actually was, is so smart, and, like, there's so much setup for it.
Yeah, exactly. It's just such an amazing sequence of events of watching these cops try to capture him, and they just never stood a chance because they're dealing with a genius here.
Yeah,
Like that's the thing is like he knew exactly what to do. It's a little forced because it's like, oh, he really just like lied down and stuff like that, and he just made it work out. It was again like there's probably tiny nitpicks you could bring up, but like it's still such an expertly crafted sequence of events that you kind of don't care. And again, that's where the Hollywoodisms come in, where you're just like, all right, it's meant to be exciting, so I
yeah,
get it.
exactly. It's still a cool sequence either way. So like, it doesn't. They don't really
Yes,
matter that much.
yeah,
It's
but
just
it's done so
yeah.
beautifully. And then we get into we get into Buffalo Bill filming himself with the close up of the nipple ring, which was probably one of the scariest things in the movie to me. Just like seeing this close up of his nipple ring, you're just like, oh.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then like
Like,
he's listening to Goodbye Horses, which is a pretty good song. I started listening to it after watching this movie. I'm like, oh, this is a great song.
well, too bad I have to think about this movie when I listen to it.
Yeah, too bad I have to think about the scene of Buffalo Bill looking down at his dick, feeling shame, and then like tucking it into his legs. And you're just like, oh, he's really forcing it. Like,
Yeah, he's
but
really forcing it.
but that's what I love. Like, I love how like the movie deal never really goes that far with it, where it's just like, oh, he's just a weird transsexual. Like, we're the '90s, we understand gay people. It's like, no, you don't. But like it never goes that far because it says like, no, he's not a real transsexual. Like he doesn't actually understand these feelings he has. He thinks he is, but he's not. And I love that the movie doesn't go too far, so then like you get it. Like like this doesn't apply to his need to change. Like he's just a straight up psychopath. He doesn't understand what he's doing,
Yeah, exactly. And like, I know that like some people have like accused this movie of like transphobia. Like I remember like reading this one review where like they actually tried calling the movie transphobic. But that
Hmm.
review also tried saying that they glorified the FBI and electors, so I don't trust that reviews. But
Yeah,
like
like
still,
yeah, that is totally a review from someone who does not get it. Like, not to be all
yeah,
gatekeepy, but but that's the thing. I don't think this movie's transphobic because, again, the movie explicitly says no, he's not that. Like, he's just a crazy person. Like, he is not that. So like that's the point. So like, just because I don't know, I guess people just assume like, oh, if a movie from the past mentions these things, that automatically makes it that. It's like not necessarily. Like again, we've established that this movie is very smart, so clearly, like I don't think the movie would make that kind of mistake. Like I think the movie is very aware of what it's talking about.
yeah, exactly. And no, it has an idea of like, because like Buffalo Bill is like portrayed in a sense that like this is not what trans people are like. This is not like how
Exactly.
you do it.
Exactly. I also just want to give a shout out to Catherine. Like, she kind of rocks for coming up with the idea of like capturing Precious and like really messing with Buffalo Bill. Like, she's not like this worthless character who needs to be saved. Like, she actually does shit in order to like kind of get some sort of leverage on Buffalo Bill. Like, it's a nice detail. It doesn't really go anywhere because again, like, that's when Clarice steps in. But at the same time, like it's still a nice reminder that, oh, this character's not entirely worthless. She doesn't just stay there and scream in
Exactly,
a hole the whole
exactly.
movie.
Exactly. She at least she's similarly like kind of smart witted like
Yes,
Clarice, but like the issue is that like she's not as like reliable as Clarice in some sense.
exactly. There's a difference. And I want to say, like, at first I was thinking about this. So obviously we're in the climax now, and it's edited in a way where it's supposed to trick you into thinking like, oh, the FBI is going after Buffalo Bill, and then Clarice is going to some other house. But then they pull the old switcheroo, and it's revealed, oh, they're in the wrong house. Whereas Clarice comes across Buffalo Bill. And I was thinking of like, oh, is this really like was that really necessary? Because like I've thought about like how a twist like that is handled, like where the movie just isn't really showing you everything. It's for the sake of the audience essentially, but at the same time it is also a twist for Clarice, because she has no idea where she's at. like she just so happens to come across Buffalo Bill. And what I like about this scene, actually, I know I'm talking a lot. I'll let you talk in a minute, but I actually remembered something that really got to me. So you know how she walks in to the kitchen and like the camera kind of tilts to her. So it tilts towards the right, her left. And like you see that picture of like the butterfly behind her. Yeah. So what I love about that is like earlier in the movie, remember she's like doing some FBI training, and like she and this other guy like break into a room. It's also obviously a test, like it's an FBI test, and like she's like, put your hands on put your hands on your head, you're under arrest, and like a gun comes into frame, and like from behind her, and the teacher's just like, Starling, where's your like where's your weak point or something like that, and she's like, from the corner, sir, and he's like, that's right. And what I like about that scene is like, I mean, essentially she's like that's like the guy, like the teacher with the gun comes in from the exact corner that essentially the frame was in, you know what I'm trying to get at, where like,
I get what...
she doesn't look towards that corner when she should have, because if she did, she would have noticed the big butterfly. I mean, granted, she figures it out because, well, Buffalo Bill's just such a weird guy. But I don't know. I don't know if that was intentional, but I feel like the fact that like that butterfly frame was like right in that corner had to be somewhat intentional. I feel like it had to be some sort of a callback. I don't know.
I can see it. I can definitely see it, but like at the same time, that's not something that I personally noticed. But like, I don't know.
I know it's just such I love the idea that it just slightly, like the camera slightly tilts towards that picture of a butterfly. I just like that. And then you obviously start to see the different moths showing up, and she's just like, oh, this is the guy. And then she's like, pulls out her gun. She's a little uneasy when she pulls out her gun, again, because she's a rookie. And then Buffalo Bill runs to his basement. So this is something that kind of bothered me, because like she never calls for backup, and Buffalo Bill is in the basement and she goes after him. It's like, okay, but he went to his basement. Like, he's not going anywhere. Like, you could like just call for backup and just stay in the kitchen until backup showed up. Like,
personally speaking, I would probably like just chalk it up to like her own like adrenaline pumping in, because like,
yes,
it's kind of the sense where like, she found him, and like,
yes,
she has to like, it's like she feels like it's do or die. And in a sense, like, she probably wants to be the one who like, actually does like, the final blow, because like,
yes,
in order to, because of her past and stuff,
Sure. Oh yeah, no. In a storytelling perspective, I get why she does it. And again, from a movie perspective, it's like, well, the climax would not be very exciting if she just like called for backup and just waited in the kitchen. Like, that's very boring. Like, of course you're going to have her like go downstairs and like go into his elaborately built basement and like track down the serial killer. So I get it. That's just me being a nitpicky asshole. But also, speaking of me being a nitpicky asshole, how come when it's in night vision, Clarice has a shadow, even though realistically she's in complete darkness?
YMS pointed that out, because like one time I was like watching like some of YMS's like Blu-ray collection, and like he mentioned that, and I was like, man, cares, because like
the movie's ruined for
like,
me. 0 out of 10.
Because like in my opinion, at least, it's very much just a case where it's like where it's just like, oh, it's just mistaken like post, where it's like,
no, it absolutely is.
That's all it is. It's not really like it was actually happening in the film.
No, it doesn't bother me, but now that I notice a shadow in the night vision scene, I'm just like, like, who cares? Like, it doesn't ruin the movie for me. I just like pointing it out, being a nitpicky asshole. But
I get it. It's fun to be a nitpicky asshole.
But I do love the scene how like, there's never like a moment where like the two of them like have like, a moment where they speak to each other, as like, and she gets like a final like line, like a final epic line where after she shoots him, like, it's treated very real. Like, he like is about to shoot her, she turns around, just totally blows him away, and then he dies because she shot him in self-defense. Like, there's no epic conclusion, that like, he's just dead now. Like, it's over and done with in like the snap of a finger. It's done so brilliantly. I love that that's how the bad guy gets caught.
It's really, It's just like like you said, like in most other movies, they'll probably be like, "You see, I was the lamb, and you are now silenced."
That would have been amazing. All right, fuck this movie. Take away all the Oscars. The fact that it didn't have that as the final line. Be like, get out of here.
I know it's fun. I'm very clever.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, it's everything's coming up Clarice after that. She found Buffalo Bill. She gets a spot at the FBI. She's at her celebration party. Everybody's happy. Her boss thanks her in a very underwhelming way. Like, maybe she works for him, maybe she doesn't. I don't. That's the other thing too. Is like, I love how Lecter, the whole movie, is kind of like, your boss has the hots for you. Like, he's only really taking you on because he likes you sexually. And she's just like, no, he doesn't. But like, the movie never really reveals that. But maybe you can interpret it that way. Like, maybe he does, like, not really respect her, like, not really in that sense. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, the movie never really says one way or the other, and I like that
it's all it's a lot of like up to interpretation, which is of course like an element I really like about the film in general.
Exactly. But of course, even though everything's coming up Clarice, we can't end without our very favorite Hannibal the Cannibal making a phone call congratulating her. And so he calls her. He's in like some country tracking down Dr. Chilton, and he ends on the brilliant line, "I'm having an old friend for dinner." Like, see, that's the thing. Even though this movie does take itself seriously, it does have moments of comedy and like the movie's having fun with what it is, and I appreciate that. It doesn't go too far one way or the other. It's a very unique balancing act, and it does so brilliantly. I'm having an old friend for dinner. Also, Hannibal is such a psycho, he doesn't flinch when a bug crawls on him. That's good acting.
It is. It's very good.
Yeah, that was Silence of the Lambs. I think I've pretty much said all my notes on it. Do you have any other notes you want to say before we get into this VHS?
No, besides from the fact that like I tried taking notes and like I got so invested in the movie I did not get the chance to take time with.
Yeah, no, there's so many notes that I took, but then there's some notes for some scenes that I didn't take because I was just so enthralled with the scenes. Like, again, the final Hannibal Lecter, like the first confrontation with Hannibal Lecter is so brilliantly done, as is the last one, that like I don't really have any notes for that, just that I love them. Like, I think they were brilliant scenes because I was so enthralled by them. Like, I was like, I don't have time to write down everything. I just want to experience the movie. So yeah. So yeah, let me tell you about this occasional VHS tape. So I own this VHS tape. Yeah, the occasional VHS tape. I have this movie on an Orion home video release because Orion did produce this movie. Orion being the same company that produced UHF, so they just make the best stuff. And so this movie is interesting. The specific VHS tape, because so for those of you who know, and you might know this, Izreal, because you've listened to the show, last year I did an episode on Fantasia, and I had that movie on VHS. And when I tried rewinding that tape in that old VCR, the tape broke, so I got rid of that tape because I had to. When I was trying to make sure that the videotape player still worked to see if I could get it to work again, I needed a practice tape to use. So I used this copy of Silence of the Lambs. The reason is because I figured, I still have it on DVD. It's fine. So I tested it out and it worked fine. So then I took it out and I was just like, all right, great. It works. I'm not going to deal with it. But then I tried it again and it also still didn't work. But the tape was fine regardless. Like, nothing happened. The tape played like normal. It was fine. Unfortunately, here comes more bad news. So I went to play it this time around to be like, oh, let me see. And at first the movie looked awful because it's VHS quality.
Yeah.
But it was slightly worse. For some reason, it looked worse than normal. Like, it was gray. It like was really staticky. Like, it just looked bad to the point that I had no idea what was happening in the opening scene. And I'm like, it's kind of hard to see what's going on. And then all of a sudden, the tape stops, rewinds itself, and just sits there. And I'm like, that has never happened before. I have never come across this in my life where a tape will like I've come across tapes stopping, but never rewinding on their own. It was very poltergeisty, I must say. But I was like,
your hobby's just haunted.
I guess so, yeah. But I was like, okay, so maybe that first VCR really did something to this tape, because again, it just stopped and rewound by itself. It was fucking bizarre, I must say. So I gave up and I said, all right, fuck it, I'm watching this on HBO Max. So I watched the movie on HBO Max and it looked great, I must say. Like, because, well, guess what? It was on a streaming service. It wasn't on fucking crappy VHS quality.
Yeah, it was on actually something acceptable.
Exactly. So, bottom line, I love this movie a lot. I'm not keeping it on VHS. I don't think I was going to keep it on VHS regardless, because I need this on like a nice Blu-ray, nice 4K. But now I have a reason to get rid of it because it looked like shit. And again, it stopped while I was only halfway through the opening credits. And then it rewound by itself. So it's like, you know what? I'm not going to deal with this. So I'm getting rid of it no matter what. This is an occasional VHS tape that will not be kept in the collection.
I personally speaking do not collect VHS tapes. Well, I have some, but I'm probably gonna get rid of them, except for one exception, which I'm not gonna say for now because maybe we'll do an episode on it someday, just because it's funny.
Interesting. I can't wait to see it then. Oh well.
It's from some space.
Is there anything else you want to say about Silence of the Lambs before we wrap up?
No, I do not. I do not think so. But overall, this movie was amazing, and yeah.
I agree. So, Izreal, now's the part of the show where you can shout out your stuff. Where can people find you?
Well, of course, there's my letterbox. That's the main place I use right now. That's where I log all sorts of movies and like occasional like weird shit. I watch all sorts of shit. Like 1 minute I'm watching Silence of the Lambs, next minute I'm watching Shingles.
And the next minute you're watching Baby's Kids. Or were you at the Baby's Kids?
I've not seen. I was not at the Baby's Kids watch party. Sorry to say.
No. Were you at the Tarzan and Jane one?
Yes.
Okay, well that's the only one that matters. Yeah.
I have some other sites I use as well. Mainly Backlogged and Rate Your Music, and I'll provide links for those. Just gotta get them up real quick.
Yeah, all your links will be in the description below. Absolutely.
Okay.
So, yeah, go follow Izreal.
But yeah. And when it comes to those sites, you'll get to see my takes on video games and music, and I have some spicy takes. I'll just say,
ooh, spicy takes incoming.
but
nice.
But yeah, that's all the stuff I really use right now. I might start a YouTube channel, but I'm not gonna plug that since I don't have anything for it. So yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
And well, we did it.
Yeah, we did it, Izreal. Nice. Thanks for coming on, dude. I'm so glad you chose these movies. These were both movies that I had seen in like early 2019 and I didn't have reviews for, but I definitely had logged. So it's interesting that like it was both these movies that I had not seen in years. So I'm glad I had the opportunity to see them again. So thank you.
Yeah, for that. Yeah. Silence of the Lambs I've not seen in years either. So like it was really cool like watching through it again and like seeing my perspective on it change. Like it was a really nice rewatch. I definitely need to rewatch movies more. I'm really bad at doing that sometimes.
Well, hey, if you watch more of the movies I talk about on the podcast, then you can listen to the episodes. Oh, funny how that works.
Exactly.
Exactly. So, All right, great. Yeah, again, thanks for coming on. And thank you, the listener, for listening to today's episode. If you want to support the show, give a like, give a comment, listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or listen on YouTube. That's fine too, doesn't matter. Also, keep a lookout for shorts. Also, keep a lookout for streams. Sometimes I do streams. We were just ranking stuff with friends a couple days ago, even though the stream crashed or something. I don't know. Something's wrong with my laptop, I think. But it's fine. We'll figure it out.
Oh, we're working on it.
But yeah. Thanks for watching, and always remember, we can't stop here. This is Bat Country.
It's Bat Country.
Bat Country. Anyway, bye everybody.
Bye.